The night shimmered with the kind of warmth that only autumn could bring. Lanterns strung above fields, laughter spilling through the crisp October air, and 1,000 tiny lights reflecting off the glassy surface of a nearby pond. It was supposed to be an evening of joy, of small-town nostalgia wrapped in gold and cinnamon. Yet to Ethan Ward, it was nothing more than noise. Too bright, too crowded, too alive. He stood at the edge of the festival grounds, his coat buttoned neatly to the throat, his expression as composed as a photograph. Every sound grated, children's squeals, the hum of country songs, the shrill peal of the Ferris wheels turning gears. He wasn't meant for places like this anymore. His mother had insisted he come, her words still echoing, "Just meet her, Ethan. 5 minutes. You owe me that much after all I've done." So he agreed, but only on his terms. 5 minutes, no more. If it felt wrong, he'd leave without apology. He'd learned long ago that detachment was efficient, even merciful. The blind date had been arranged through a charity raffle, though in truth it had been his mother's orchestration from start to finish. Ethan had imagined a formal dinner, polished glasses, a sommelier explaining the wine list. Instead, he found himself surrounded by hay bales and flickering pumpkins. Then the crowd parted, and he saw her. Clara Bennett. She walked toward him from beneath an archway of string lights, her silhouette brushed with amber and silver. Her hair, soft, golden, and windswept, fell loose over her shoulders. She wasn't dressed to impress, not really. A simple coat, a pale scarf, worn leather boots. But that simplicity drew his eyes. She was real, unvarnished, free of artifice. He stared longer than he meant to. "Clara?" he said when she reached him. She smiled, her cheeks flushed from the cold. "Hi, you must be Ethan." Her handshake was light, cool, and unassuming. "Thanks for meeting me here," she said. "I know it's not typical." He raised an eyebrow, glancing at the carnival chaos around them. "You could say that. No wine list, no reservations. You really broke the rules of the assignment." Her laugh came easily, unguarded and musical. It startled him, not because it was loud, but because it was genuine. "I asked your mother if we could meet somewhere simple," she said. "I don't like first dates in restaurants. Too much pretending. Too many mirrors." He studied her for a moment. "And you think this is better?" "I think it's honest," she replied softly. No one here is trying too hard. People are too busy enjoying themselves. They began to walk. Their conversation stumbled at first, careful, observational. But Clara didn't rush to fill the silence. She let the pauses breathe, and somehow that unsettled him more than the noise around them. He was used to people scrambling for his attention. She didn't. When she stopped suddenly and pointed behind him, he turned to see the Ferris wheel, tall, weathered, and blinking gold against the sky. "You ever been on that?" she asked. "Not in a long time," he admitted. "It looks different from up there. The town, I mean. It's quieter, smaller, like it all makes sense for a little while." She hesitated before adding, "My sister and I used to ride it every year, no matter what else was happening." For the first time, Ethan saw something shift in her eyes, something tender and unspoken. The breeze caught a strand of her hair, and she brushed it aside absently. Without thinking, he said, "I want to ride it now." She blinked in surprise, then smiled. "You sure?" He nodded once. "I don't have anywhere else I need to be." The rule, 5 minutes, crumbled quietly. They lingered along the way, pausing by a ring toss booth. Clara missed every throw but laughed like she was winning gold. When she bought cotton candy, blue of course, because it tastes better that way, he couldn't refuse a bite, though it stuck absurdly to his tongue. She beamed at his grimace. At a photo booth, she dragged him in, their pictures capturing her joy and his mild confusion. He folded the strip carefully into his wallet, unsure why. As the night deepened, the air grew colder. They stopped by a booth filled with floating toy ducks. Clara's laughter faded as she stared at them circling slowly under the light. "You okay?" Ethan asked. "Yeah," she said, though her voice wavered. Then quietly, "There are days I wonder if I'm any good at what I do. I work hard, but sometimes it feels like it's never enough." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he picked up a toy rifle from the counter and handed it to her. "And tonight you don't have to save anyone. Just aim and shoot." Her soft laugh came again, smaller this time, but real. She missed twice, hit once, and turned toward him, triumphant. Something warm flickered in his chest. He realized he hadn't checked his watch in hours. They reached the Ferris wheel just as twilight burned into indigo. Its bulbs glowed faintly golden against the dark. Clara hesitated at the gate. "You sure you're okay?" he asked. She nodded, stepping inside. The metal cabin creaked as it lifted them higher. Lights below blurred into a watercolor of motion and sound. Halfway up, the wheel swayed. Clara stiffened. Her hand shot out, gripping his. "I hate this," she whispered. "Not the height, the helplessness, the feeling that if something breaks, there's nothing I can do." Her voice trembled. "It's the same feeling I had when we lost him, the boy I couldn't save." Ethan's breath caught. She went on, voice thin as glass. "I told myself I was strong. But that night I wasn't. I froze." He didn't move. He let her hold on. Then the lights below flickered out. The entire wheel stopped. Darkness enveloped them, thick and soundless. "Power outage," he murmured. She said nothing, her grip tightening. Quietly, he draped his coat around her shoulders. "It's just a little darkness," he said. "We're okay." Her breathing slowed. Then she whispered, "Sometimes you do everything right, and it still ends the same. And no one teaches you how to keep going after that." He looked at her, the moonlight glancing off her lashes. "I know that sound," he said finally. "I used to be a surgeon." Her head turned sharply. He continued, voice steady. "My mentor, Dr. Reeves, died on the table during a procedure I led. Equipment failure. I walked out the next day. Haven't held a scalpel since." "You blamed yourself," she said softly. "I didn't know who else to blame." The silence stretched, fragile but whole. "Maybe saving people isn't about fixing them," Clara said. "Maybe it's about being there when they're afraid." Ethan looked at her hand in his. "You're doing that now," he said. "So are you," she whispered. Below them, the lights flickered back to life. The Ferris wheel began to move again, slow and steady. Their hands stayed linked until the cabin touched the ground. Neither spoke. They simply stepped out into the glow of the festival, changed in ways neither could name. The ride had ended, but something else had begun. The fair was emptying out, laughter fading into the distance as lanterns dimmed one by one. Ethan and Clara walked side by side beneath the golden strings of light, their footsteps crunching softly against the gravel path. Words had thinned between them, but silence no longer felt like a wall. It was something gentle, shared, understood. At the edge of the festival, she turned to him. "Well," she said, with a faint smile that trembled at the corners. "That was unexpected." He met her gaze, his expression unreadable but softened by the amber glow. "In a good way," he said. She extended her hand. "Good night, Ethan." He took it carefully, his touch steady and lingering for a breath longer than he meant to. "Good night, Clara." She began to walk away. He stood still, watching her fade into the night, the hem of her coat brushing the light from each lamp she passed. At the corner, she turned once more. Their eyes met, a brief, wordless exchange that said far more than either dared to admit. Then she was gone. Ethan drew a deep breath, ready to leave, when something pale caught his attention. Draped across the bench where they'd sat earlier was a scarf, light, soft, and faintly scented with lavender and vanilla. He picked it up, holding it in his hands as though it were something delicate and irreplaceable. For a long time, he just stood there, the fabric pressed between his fingers, the night colder than before. Then he folded it neatly beneath his arm and began to walk home. The next morning, The scarf still lay on his kitchen counter beside a cooling mug of black coffee. He stared at it as if it might speak. A dozen excuses flickered through his mind: forgetfulness, coincidence, closure, but none rang true. Finally, he reached for his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in months. His mother answered with the familiar lilt of knowing. "You want her number, don't you?" He hesitated. "Yes." "I told you 5 minutes wouldn't be enough," she said, satisfaction threading her voice. He exhaled softly. This isn't returning a scarf," she interrupted. "Perfectly respectable excuse, dear. Just don't wait too long." He smiled faintly despite himself. Noted. That afternoon, he found her. The little bookshop sat between a bakery and an old barber shop, the kind of place that smelled of dust, stories, and second chances. Through the window, he saw her sitting cross-legged on the floor, a stack of medical textbooks surrounding her. She was tracing her finger along the edge of a page, lips moving silently as she read. When the bell above the door chimed, she looked up, surprised. "Ethan!" He lifted the scarf. "You left this." Her expression softened. She stood, brushing invisible dust from her jeans. "I was wondering where I dropped that." He stepped forward, offering it to her. Their fingers brushed briefly, and the air between them seemed to catch. "I didn't expect to see you again," she said quietly. "I didn't plan to," he admitted, "but then I did." A small, hesitant smile tugged at her lips. "In that case, make yourself useful." "Help me carry these." He chuckled, relieved. "Gladly." They stacked old editions together, moving slowly through aisles that smelled of time and ink. She explained, between laughter and small pauses, that she used the books for her young patients. "Some of the kids like when the drawings look old-fashioned," she said. "It feels less like a hospital, more like a story." He listened, intrigued by the way her voice softened whenever she spoke of them. At one point, she asked, "Why run a hospital if you don't believe in saving people anymore?" He paused, leaning against a shelf. "Maybe because you were right," he said finally. "Healing isn't always about surgeries or miracles. Sometimes it's about building a place where people are allowed to try again." Clara regarded him thoughtfully. "I think that counts," she said. For the first time in a long while, he felt seen, not as a title, not as a success story, but as a man still learning how to be whole. A week later, Clara's hospital called a staff meeting. The news rippled through the room like sunlight breaking through clouds. A major renovation grant had been approved for the pediatric unit. New equipment, a family comfort room, an art therapy center. And the donor? Anonymous. No name, no plaque, just a simple note in the report. "In honor of the nurses who never stop showing up." Clara's heart stilled. She said nothing, but she knew. Later, when she walked past the pediatric wing, she saw a temporary sign pinned to the wall beside yellow caution tape. In clean, simple letters it read, "Coming soon, a space for healing." She touched the paper gently, her throat tight. "You're still saving people, Ethan," she whispered. Just differently. Weeks passed. The world spun on, quieter now, as if holding its breath. When the invitation arrived, a formal gala hosted by the city's medical foundation, Clara hesitated before accepting. She had never been to an event like that. But when Ethan called to ask if she would come, there was something in his voice that made it impossible to refuse. The night of the gala glittered with chandeliers and polished marble floors. Ethan had attended countless gatherings like it, but this one felt different. He wasn't showing off a colleague or an investor. He wanted her there, not as a display, but as a choice. When Clara arrived, the room seemed to pause. She stood at the top of the grand staircase, wearing a navy dress that moved like water and a simple silver bracelet catching the light. For a moment she seemed uncertain, a quiet figure in a sea of sparkle. Ethan crossed the room quickly to meet her. "You look beautiful," he said simply. Her smile was soft, her eyes a little unsure. "Thank you." He held out his hand. "You're the only person I wanted standing beside me tonight." No titles, no expectations. They entered the ballroom together. For a while, everything was effortless: conversation, champagne, laughter. But soon came the questions. So, a woman in red asked with a polite tilt of her head, "Are you one of the research fellows?" Clara smiled. "I work in emergency pediatrics, mostly night shifts now." The woman's nod was sharp, dismissive. "Ah, important work, I'm sure." The air cooled by a degree. Two men near the silent auction whispered, just loud enough, "If Ward's getting serious—" "I'd expect at least a director, not a floor nurse." Clara froze. The glass trembled in her hand. Ethan, busy with reporters across the room, didn't see her face tighten. When he returned, she was composed again, but her eyes had dimmed. "Everything okay?" he asked softly. "I think I'll head out early," she said. "Did something happen?" She hesitated. "You're a good man, Ethan, but I don't know if I'm strong enough to keep proving I deserve to be in rooms like this." He reached for her arm, but she stepped back. "I'm tired of feeling like I have to earn the right to be seen." And with that she turned. The scarf, her scarf, slipped from her shoulder and fluttered to the floor behind her as she disappeared into the night. The scarf lay on the marble floor long after Clara had gone. Ethan picked it up slowly, his pulse steady but his chest hollow. Around him the gala spun on, music, laughter, cameras flashing, but all he could hear was the echo of her voice. "I don't know if I'm strong enough to keep proving I deserve to be in rooms like this." He excused himself quietly, slipping out a side door into the chill of the night. The city spread below him in layers of gold and shadow, but none of it felt real. The stars were hidden behind clouds, and for the first time in years, he felt like the boy who used to sit in hospital corridors, waiting for news that never came. He'd built walls out of logic and protocol, but Clara had walked right through them, not to destroy them, but to show him what they'd kept out. By the time he reached his car, rain had begun to fall, thin, whispering, uncertain. He didn't start the engine. Instead, he sat there, her scarf on the passenger seat, and thought about what it meant to stay when everything felt like too much. 2 days passed. Then a week, no calls, no texts, just silence. The pediatric wing reopened the following month. Bright murals, sunlight, laughter echoing from rooms that used to feel too still. Clara stood in the doorway, watching a little boy with a cast on his arm paint uneven stars on a wall. His mother sat nearby, smiling for the first time in days. Should have felt like triumph. Instead, she felt an ache she couldn't name. The scarf she'd lost, the one she hadn't dared to retrieve, was still gone. But in its place, she carried a memory of a man who listened when she broke, who stayed when the lights went out, who saw her not as someone fragile, but as someone fighting. That night, she worked the late shift. Around midnight, she found herself in the quiet break room, staring at a vending machine that refused to take her dollar bill. She sighed, muttering, "Of course." A familiar voice replied softly behind her. "Still fighting the odds, I see." Her breath caught. She turned. Ethan stood in the doorway, hands in his coat pockets, rain still glittering on his shoulders. He looked exhausted but steady, like someone who'd finally stopped running from himself. "What are you doing here?" she asked, heartbeat stumbling. He stepped forward. "Returning something." He held out the scarf, clean, folded, edges slightly frayed. She blinked, unable to speak. He set it gently on the counter. "You left this," he said. "But that's not really why I came." Silence filled the room, dense, fragile. "I didn't stop you that night because I thought I could fix it," he continued. "I stopped because I was afraid. Afraid that maybe you were right, that I didn't know how to be in rooms where things actually mattered anymore." She crossed her arms, eyes soft but guarded. "You don't have to explain." "I do," he said quietly, "because every time I walked away before, I told myself it was for the right reasons." That distance meant control.
That detachment meant strength.
But then you showed up with your ridiculous blue cotton candy and your honesty, and I realized how much I'd mistaken silence for peace. Clara's lips trembled, part disbelief, part something deeper.
Ethan,
He stepped closer, not reaching for her, just close enough for her to feel the warmth of him. You once said saving people isn't always about fixing them. Sometimes it's just being there.
I thought I understood that. But I didn't, not until you, her throat tightened.
You can't say things like that and expect everything to fall back into place. I don't want it to fall back, he said. I want to start again, somewhere quieter, somewhere real. The vending machine hummed behind them, a low, steady sound like the world reminding them it was still turning. Clara let out a shaky laugh.
You drove all the way here in the middle of the night to give me my scarf and a speech?
He smiled faintly. You always did prefer honesty. Something in her expression softened, an invisible door creaking open. She looked down at the scarf, tracing its edge. You kept it, he nodded. It reminded me of you, of the first night I stayed longer than I meant to. She met his eyes then, and for a long, quiet moment, they just looked at each other. The hum of fluorescent lights, the faint beep of a monitor down the hall, the quiet between heartbeats. Finally, she said, There's a coffee shop across the street that's still open. The kind that burns the espresso but plays good music, he smiled. Lead the way. The rain had stopped by the time they stepped outside. The streets glistened, reflections of city lights rippling in shallow puddles. Clara pulled the scarf around her neck, the fabric warm now from her hands. Ethan walked beside her, coat collar turned up against the wind. At the cafe, they sat near the window, 2 steaming cups between them, the smell of rain mixed with coffee and faint vanilla. You know, Clara said after a while, the first time I saw you, I thought you hated every minute of being there. He chuckled. You weren't wrong. But then you stayed. I did. He met her gaze. And I've been staying ever since. She looked down, smiling into her cup. You really are terrible at small talk. He leaned back, eyes crinkling. And you're still better at it than you think. They talked until the cafe lights dimmed. About work.
About fear.
About what it means to lose people and still choose to show up the next day. When they finally stepped outside again, dawn was brushing the sky with pale grey. Do you ever think about what happens next? She asked softly. All the time, he said. But tonight, I'd rather just walk you home. And so they did, past quiet storefronts, empty intersections, and the hum of a city waking up. Outside her building, she paused.
Ethan, she said, voice careful. Whatever this is, it doesn't have to be perfect. He nodded.
Good, because I'm not. Her laugh was quiet, almost a sigh. Neither am I. They stood there a moment longer. Then she reached up, brushed a raindrop, or maybe a tear from his cheek, and whispered, Good night. He didn't try to stop her. Didn't need to, because for once it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like breathing again. A month slipped quietly into the past. Autumn deepened, the city trading heat for amber leaves and soft, drifting winds. Ethan hadn't planned it, not really, but somehow he found himself drawn again to the rhythms of Clara's world. Coffee breaks between double shifts, early morning walks past the hospital garden, laughter that came easier now. No longer weighed down by what-ifs, he didn't ask for more. He simply showed up steady and present. And she, cautious at first, began to let him. Then one evening, a message appeared on her phone. I want to see the town from above again. But this time, not just for 5 minutes. It was enough to make her heart skip. When dusk fell, she walked toward the fairgrounds, the same festival lights glowing softly in the cool air. Her light blue scarf fluttered around her neck, catching the fading sun. Everything looked the same, children laughing near the carousel, vendors shouting over the hum of music, but it all felt different. Ethan waited near the base of the Ferris wheel, dressed simply in a grey sweater, a wool blanket folded over his arm. When he saw her, his expression shifted. Relief, fondness, something deeper. She smiled, matching his quiet ease. "Right on time," he said. She laughed lightly. "You're the one who sent the invitation." Together they stepped into the small cabin. The door clicked shut, the gears rumbled, and slowly the world began to rise beneath them. Streets, rooftops, the faint glow of the fair stretching outward like constellations. Clara glanced out the window. "Let's hope the lights stay on this time," Ethan's lips curved. "If they don't," I brought back up. He lifted the blanket between them. Her laugh was soft, genuine, the kind that reached her eyes. "You really are learning?" For a while they sat without speaking. The wheel creaked gently as it climbed, the night pressing close around them. From this height, the world looked small and tender, as though all the noise and judgment had been left far below. When they reached the top, the cabin rocked slightly and came to a brief stop. Clara turned toward him, her scarf brushing his sleeve. The silence was comfortable, almost reverent. Ethan reached into his pocket and drew out a small velvet box, thin, flat, nothing extravagant. Her brow furrowed.
"What's that?"
He opened it carefully. Inside lay a silver chain, delicate and gleaming with a tiny Ferris wheel charm etched in fine detail. "It's beautiful," she whispered. He didn't kneel, didn't rush. He simply looked at her with quiet steadiness. "The first time we met, I told myself I'd leave after 5 minutes. That was my rule, never stay long enough to care." He paused, his voice low but certain. "But 5 minutes with you changed everything. You laughed like you meant it. You listened like it mattered. You made me want to stay, not just that night, but in the kind of life that could hold someone like you." Clara's throat tightened. The lights of the fair flickered across her face, glinting in her eyes. He continued, "This isn't a proposal, not yet. It's not a promise that I know where everything is headed. It's just my way of saying I'm here.
"I choose this."
I choose you." He lifted the necklace gently and fastened it around her neck. The charm rested just above her heart. "If you ever feel unsteady," he murmured, "if the room feels too heavy or the world too loud, I'll be right here." "You don't have to walk it alone." She pressed her palm over the charm, feeling the cool metal warm against her skin. "You already are," she said softly. For a moment, neither spoke. The Ferris wheel began its slow descent, the hum of the fair rising to meet them again. She leaned into him, head resting lightly against his shoulder. His fingers found hers, not with urgency, but with quiet certainty. Below, music drifted through the crisp air. An old tune played on a violin near the carousel, sweet and unhurried. The scent of caramel apples and cider wrapped around them as their cabin touched the ground once more. When the attendant opened the door, Ethan stepped out first and turned to help her down. His hand lingered at her waist, steady and sure. The festival lights shimmered in the distance, and for a heartbeat the world felt timeless. She looked up at him, smiling faintly. "So, Dr. Blake, does this count as staying?" He grinned. "I'd say it's a start." They wandered through the fair together, hand in hand, past children clutching cotton candy, past an old man sketching portraits under a striped tent. Every sound, every flicker of light felt like a memory being rewritten, gentler, truer. At the edge of the crowd, a small stage glowed with soft yellow bulbs. A singer began a slow, familiar melody, something about second chances and nights that never really end. Ethan stopped, his thumb brushing over the back of her hand. "Dance with me?" he asked. She hesitated, glancing around.
"Here, in front of everyone?"
He smiled. "There's only us." And there was. She stepped closer, her scarf swaying in the wind, her hand fitting against his chest. They moved slowly, unhurried, the rhythm of the song carrying them. Around them the world blurred into color and sound. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. The space between them said everything. The forgiveness, the choice, the simple truth that love had found them not in grand gestures, but in the quiet act of staying. When the song ended, he rested his forehead lightly against hers.
"This time," he whispered, "I'm not leaving." Clara's eyes lifted to his, clear and steady.
"And this time," she answered, "I'm not letting you." They stayed like that for a long moment, the crowd melting into laughter and music around them, the night wrapping close and kind. Then they walked forward side by side, disappearing into the golden lights. Two people who had once promised themselves not to care, now learning how to begin again. The scarf fluttered behind her in the cool wind, a ribbon of colour against the dark, and somewhere above, the Ferris wheel turned once more, slow and steady, carrying their reflection higher each time, proof that sometimes the smallest choices, the briefest moments, can rewrite an entire lifetime.